part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Good day, everyone. Welcome to the Sabol Brothers on the Baseline podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Scott Sabol.
I'm John Sabol. How are you guys doing?
You can follow us online, Sabol Brothers Baseline Podcast on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter, Scott Sabol Fox 8.
And follow yours truly at John_Sabol. And give us a like and comments on the anywhere where you listen to podcasts. Really helps our algorithm out, whether it's Apple or Spotify.
Absolutely. So this is an interesting topic. About a year and a half ago, we did a podcast on the Dome Stadium Corporation, which was back in the mid-'80s. And joining us today is almost like a follow-up and maybe just another chapter to the whole saga, is a man who was pivotal in the Dome Stadium design and proposal more than 40 years ago. His creation was called the Hexatron, something I'm sure most of you have never even heard of before. And as you know, it never materialized. But what resulted was, of course, Gateway, which was now we know as Progressive Field and Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. The old stadium, of course, was torn down in the mid-'90s, with the current stadium opening in 1999. Joining us today is the original early 1980s Dome Stadium architect, Robert Corna. Robert, good afternoon, and how are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on. It's been a while since I've talked about this stadium. I remember being on Trevisano and being on Channel 3, and it really caught people's imagination back then. I think one thing that I discovered about Cleveland is no matter who you are, no matter if you're a sports enthusiast or not, that if we're going to do a stadium, let's do it right. And I think Cleveland deserves the best we can give it. And we kind of gave it a second-class run when we built the stadium. It was done good, but it was done quickly, and a lot of things were left out. The main thing that I was sorry about was that they didn't even provide the ability to add a roof later, which they could have. They just built it, dismissed the whole idea. And as I went through the whole 40 years of about the Dome Stadium, I can kind of take you back to, what started it was that we wanted to try to keep the Browns here in Cleveland. That's where it all started. And they needed a new stadium. That stadium was built back in the Depression era. And if we were going to build one, the object was to build something that nobody else had, obviously. But to have the ability to have other events besides just football. We looked at having a stadium that would bring in concerts, but we also had the ability to do a stadium that was next to a convention center. Now, that's money. That's money in the bank. We have a convention center right there. And if you go to Indianapolis, you go to Dallas, they built their stadiums next to convention centers. Indianapolis has over 260 events a year in their retractable roof stadium. If you're going to build a stadium, why build it for 10 days and put that kind of money in? Maybe, in my estimation, it's not billions more. It's probably today about 500 million to 600 million. Since we're building, if we can build new, to build a retractable roof. The revenue from one Super Bowl for one city is now estimated to be $1.5 billion, $1.5 billion for 1 week. How can you dismiss that possibility? We will never get one without a Dome Stadium. They're not coming to Cleveland in the middle of winter. It won't happen. And some other things that really make sense is why not the other things that could happen in that stadium? Why couldn't we have our own bowl here in Cleveland? Why couldn't we have Ohio State play Notre Dame here? Why couldn't Cleveland State play in a stadium? There's so many multiple uses, but our stadium wasn't designed for soccer, which is unbelievable. It's not designed for lacrosse. I mean, things that are coming in the future, soccer, lacrosse, rugby, all kinds of, how about world soccer coming here to Cleveland? Why not? So if we look at what we're trying to do here, why are we doing it for 10 days? It doesn't make any sense anymore to see that happen. So I am an advocate right now, and a strong advocate, that Cleveland needs a covered stadium, period, if we're going to do this. And I'm really going to be strong at it. I don't care who's making the decision out there. The public, the people in the end will make the decision on this thing. And I think part of that decision making is what's best for our future? What's best for the next 50 years? And let's don't build a stadium for 20 years or 25 years like we built this one. Let's make what that'll last. I look at, to get you back to the beginning of how I got involved, so what am I doing being a stadium architect? Well, my first answer to that is, it doesn't take 100 people to come up with a great idea. Everybody asks, well, who designed the Eiffel Tower? Well, Eiffel. And if you look at, one man can do something if it's creative, if it works. It doesn't make 200 people in a big firm to make it happen. I think it's all about the idea. I've been around Cleveland my whole career. I've done a lot of things here. I mean, I developed the flats with Jeff Jacobs. We did the powerhouse. We did shooters. I was in the flats in the 70s when nobody would go down there. I said, nobody will cross the river. But you know what? Cleveland has a future. What is it? It's got a waterfront. It's got an incredible waterfront. So what I'm doing with this proposal is something nobody thought of that's so simple. I mean, they're talking about going to the airport.
Mm-hmm.
They're not taking this stadium out of downtown Cleveland. I don't care who's trying to make that decision. We're keeping that stadium downtown because we're starting to just survive with housing and people are starting to want to live here again. What, do you want to take a major piece away?
Well, Robert, I think, not to interrupt you here, but the big thing that the Haslams with the Browns want to do is they want to build a village in addition to their stadium. And to their mind, there's no land in Cleveland where they can do that, where they can build retail, restaurants, bars, apartments, you name it, and then take the revenue from there with their village idea. That's what they would do in Brook Park. There's not any other land as it sits right now that they could fit where they want to do. The idea of the post office idea south of Progressive Field, they claim there's not enough land for what they want to do there. I don't know. That's what they, that's the idea of the Brook Park.
I've heard all this, and you know what? I need to sit down with them, and they need to see what I sent you. And here's what's so important about it. The most valuable piece of land between Chicago and New York is our lakefront. You can ask anybody in real estate.
Mm-hmm.
There is no more valuable piece of land than the lakefront. I found a solution that's right in front of their eyes. They'll probably steal the idea and do it anyway. But what I did, it's a simple idea. See, everything that's down in the stadium right now is built on fill. All that used to be a beach at one time, and it was filled, and you can build on fill. Well, there were foundations, there were caissons that went down, but so it's not like it restricts you from building on the fill. So why not just extend out a little bit farther into the lake, enough land to build the stadium? And if you do that, now you've cleared up the land where the stadium is for a tremendous lakefront development.
I'm
Not
just
only
curious.
that,
Oh, go ahead.
well, not only that, but now when you clear the stadium out, because you could build my stadium while you're still playing in the old stadium. Now think about that. All I have to do is go out in the lake and put pilings in and fill it. And it's simple. It's not like something that's crazy expensive. And you know how much the land costs? $1 from the state of Ohio for a suburban land lease. The land is free. And what they're doing is they would clear up all the land where the stadium is for development, that they can develop into housing and they can develop into shopping. They can bring people to the lakefront. They can provide public space. They could take that land and they could do a village second to none when it's part of the stadium. Now, another part of my stadium idea is something that if you go to Detroit and see what they did with their arena, their basketball arena, tremendous thing they did because they put all the concessions inside. They put a cover over it. They put a glass cover around it, and people use it year round. The restaurants are open all year. Well, my concept for our stadium is to take the Hexatron shape, continue around it like a glass cover. You could see it in the drawings, and I create a year-round space that people can use year-round. And you bring them to the lake, and you can put restaurants in there. You could put all kinds of concessions that are part of the stadium. But the main thing that some friends of mine were involved with it, but the Browns have a sports gambling ticket now, where they can put sports gambling in their stadium. Well, what do you mean sports gambling? Let's talk about that. How do you pay for the stadium? Sports gambling. So there's a lot of things that are out there that we can do that you couldn't do before. And gambling is huge, so huge now. It's like going crazy. And it's something that can be part of what we're doing. And that's why I think the idea of creating a year-round facility on the lake, rather than just for 10 days a year, we can now add events that are part of our convention center. Our convention center can use that space like they do in Indianapolis, so we can have year-round events. Why not NCAA basketball tournaments here in Cleveland? How about other kinds of things that can happen with major worldwide sporting events? We would have a facility like none other, but just think about this. Just think about this stadium being on the lake. What is that going to be like where people could be? I'm talking about in the lake.
Take us back to the mid 80s, back to like 1984, 85 with the original Hexatron. We went from Dome Stadium Corporation to Gateway in the span of half a decade. Why didn't the Dome Stadium concept, specifically yours, get off the ground, in your opinion?
I'll tell you how it started with me is Charles Deaton. When I tell you about how one man can design something, Eiffel can design a tower. Well, Charles Deaton was one of the greatest architects in the United States. He designed Kansas City Stadium. I got to meet with him. He came here and met with me and Art Modell about how to redo his stadium and how we should build a new stadium. And one of the things I learned from him is that stadium is still, that's over 60 years old, still one of the greatest stadiums in the country. But he did the baseball and football stadium together, but he designed it with a cover that was going to slide over both of them. Which
I remember seeing that, yeah.
And it's actually designed so they would have a cover that would slide between the two from baseball to football. So they were two separate stadiums. As I started to talk with him, I started getting the idea, well, look, we could do baseball and football in the same stadium. And everybody back then said you can't. Well, that's where the Hexatron design came, the six-sided stadium. All you had to do is retract the end zone seats, and you had a baseball stadium, just because of the shape of it. And then if you look at the points of the Hexaton, most seats ended up on the 50-yard line. Now, how do you make the cover work? Well, I started talking with all the experts and all the national design firms, and they said you can't do it. You can't build a retractable stadium, too expensive. Always the word was, it's too expensive, which I still hear today. Well, I ended up doing my research, and I worked with Charles Deaton on the design of the Hexatron, but I also brought in the guys that did Indianapolis, because they had just done their blow-up dome. And what I did is I found a company called American Power Door Company. They do giant doors. They did the Saturn rocket doors. Their specialty was giant doors. Okay. And our idea is, and my idea still today, is how to do it economically. You don't have to open the structure and create the hole. You can leave the structure there and just slide the skin. So you make this hangar door that slides, and it's flat. It's not domed. So my stadium was designed, I took hangar doors and put them flat on the roof. And I had a company called American Power Door Company, who did these all over the world, joined my team and helped me design the Hexatron. Electric powered, what they are, their name today is called Unisystems. Unisystems has done 8 of the retractable roofs. They've done Dallas, they did Indianapolis. They came from the Hexatron idea. And that's all they did and now that's all they specialize in is they're doing retractable roofs all over the world, where they're part of my team today. And they're helping me develop what is an economical solution to putting a whole roof that opens up. And it doesn't have to be structure that opens up. It's just got to be open, if you can picture that. Well, you probably cut your costs in half. Instead of costing $1 billion, that they say, for retractable roof, we could probably do it maybe for 500 million, 600 million. And the people that I have working with me are the engineers that are going to work with, one great asset we have in Cleveland is we have a great steel company that can work with us to help develop the structure. So that's what we're working on. I won't mention the name, but you know who I'm talking about. They're national and international. They're big into sports in Cleveland. So we can, here in Cleveland, put together a price, a structure to make this thing work. But let me tell you about the 80s, how that would happen. I came out with the idea and I met with Art Modell. That's who I started with. And Art Modell really liked the idea. But we had a baseball owner who was getting ready to sell the stadium. At that time, I was partners with Jeff Jacobs. He and I did the flats together and did Nautica. So I got to meet, and his uncle was my neighbor, Dave Jacobs. So I got them to start thinking about buying the Indians, because I figured if they bought the Indians, I had this thing in pat. Well, they were in the process of buying the Indians, which they eventually did. What happened between them and Modell is Modell had them as a tenant for the stadium. So he didn't want to give up them. He wanted to keep control.
Sure.
So what happened between the two of them is they could never agree. He would never agree to join with Jacobs on a single stadium. So he decided he was going to just remodel his, where always in the back of his mind was he was thinking getting out of town. So basically what happened is they built a baseball-only stadium, and they didn't build it, where the stadium is now, because they continued playing football. So Modell eventually left town. We got a baseball stadium, which really generated from the seed of what we did with the Hexatron. I mean, we got Jacobs to buy the Indians, which saved the Indians from moving somewhere else. Because believe it or not, there were others. Tampa was trying to buy them. There were other people trying to buy the Indians, so we were able to save them and keep them in our town because we did build them a stadium.
Did you have any issues with any politicians, the state of Ohio? Were they on board with the whole Dome Stadium thing, or did they get kind of cold feet at the end?
Well, what happened, I definitely had Dick Celeste totally in our favor of doing the Hexatron. He was one of my biggest supporters, and he wanted to do it by the lakefront. He was all in favor of the stadium by the lakefront. He was in favor of the joint stadiums, but politicians couldn't control what Modell was doing. He's the guy that uprooted it, and he's the reason we could have had a combination baseball, football, Dome Stadium today. Back then, the numbers were 350 million, to do it. It's totally different. Back then, you had investment tax credits. I remember, Jacobs and another partner was the Carney brothers. They were going to put up $50 million because they could get investment tax credits back then. And then somebody came up with a stupid idea of selling seats, right? Well, that was us. Sell the seats, lease them. Oh, you can't do that. Well, I can't do that to my customers. What happened was that was the way they financed every other stadium. You did the seat licensing, and then we came up with the idea of there were several ideas we had. One was to get a name. At that time, we had Marlboro as the name, which wouldn't have worked today. But you definitely could have got. Well, you eventually knew that there's a lot of money in getting name rights. Put them right on the retractable roof as it opened. The other one was what we did was the syntax. We came up with the idea that you put that on the ballot. You call it a syntax. and kind of had a good name to it where people would vote for it because there's a tax on liquor and alcohol. So that's how we got it. We had it financed, we had it all put together. But when you had Modell pull out of it, that was the end of it.
Did that surprise you that he pulled out of it?
You know what? I think that his, I consider him a very selfish guy. He was in his own interest.
Of
He
course.
didn't have, he say, I love the city and all that. No, he wasn't for the city. He was about Modell and what was best for him because he really should have done that. He should have gotten together with Jacobs. It's a perfect time in our history. Both of them together, we'd have had a great. And when they say that you can't play baseball and football together, have you heard that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what happened right after who called me right after the Hexatron died was Toronto. I went up to Toronto. Labatt's was giving them land in the suburbs to build a new stadium. Well, we went up there and we talked about a retractable roof. Well, guess who's got a retractable roof for football and baseball?
Toronto.
Next to what? Their convention center. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
They just took everything that we were doing, they did it and did it successfully. But I could tell you right now that we don't have to play both. We have a nice stadium, so to play them both together. But what the future of this stadium is about. First, it's about we're going to ask for 2 Super Bowls. We're going to ask for one in the 65th Super Bowl. Reason for that is after 64 Super Bowls without Cleveland having one, don't we deserve at least one? The guys that started it, if you're giving LA 2 now, they give LA's new stadium, they gave them 2. They're giving LA 2. I mean, Las Vegas 2. Okay, give us 2, because you know what that does? That bringing that revenue to Cleveland is something that we can bank on, and you can help finance the stadium with the future revenues from 2 Super Bowls. And I think the other thing would be to get the NCAA to try to approve basketball, a Final Four here in the stadium.
Mm-hmm.
We can get some commitments from Ohio State to play here 1 or 2 games. I think the idea of Cleveland hosting the Big Ten championship is definitely in the cards. There's no better location than Cleveland that's more central. So there's a lot of things we can start doing when you have major events. Now, you want to talk about concerts? Concerts are the big things in stadiums. We have a cover. We can have concerts in January, but you don't have to. The biggest problem with concerts, the size of them, they don't all have to be for 80,000 people. So we designed, in our design, are 2 things. One is a amphitheater in the end zone that can be developed into a concert amphitheater for up to 4 to 4,000. We could have weekly concerts tied in with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We told you about the concessions. The concessions are something that you can develop. You can have bars that are designed around rock and roll and bands. So a lot of things we can do with this stadium that aren't just about 10 days a year for football. We can bring people to the lake.
Yeah, you need to have that because you need to, reap the benefits of having a multi-venued stadium or multi-purpose stadium that you can do that. And I think that's what people have always wanted now. I think the tide has changed so much here, Robert, where fans don't care if it's open air or not. Just give us state-of-the-art stuff. So, I have a couple follow-up questions for you in order. You mentioned the lakefront. You'd say go out in the lake. I'm just curious. I have no architecture background, but I am just curious. How far out would you have to go to put landfill in, and how long would that take?
Well, we're only going out about 100 yards just to get it out so it's away from the existing stadium, so we can keep a really key component of this. The land costs you $1 a year for the lease from the state of Ohio. It's called underwater lease. A lot cheaper than buying that land out of Brook Park. But what happens, and I need to convince the Browns from a business standpoint, because I'm a developer. I developed the flats. I developed a lot of things. I've done over 1,000 apartments in downtown Cleveland, but I know what the market is. The future market for Cleveland, office buildings are kind of dying.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what we need? We need 2 things: residential development and they need to have services. Restaurants, shops, things have to start happening commercially. So this downtown piece, they could develop it almost into like a Crocker Park, where it's a combination of retail, housing that works together, and you don't need to have a ton of office space. I think the day of the high rise in Cleveland is a long way away. I mean, we kind of burning the last piece of the candle with Sherwin-Williams. That's probably the last high rise you'll see. But, the thing is more into lower rise development, which the lakefront's perfect for. So I think the idea of having a multi-use facility for the Browns, they couldn't ask for anything better. Why would you build? The problem with what they're trying to build, they don't understand this, but I do. You're going to try to build apartments where planes fly over your head. You're going to try to have concerts where planes are flying over your head. Would you live underneath an airport? Well, you go around the airport and look at, they're all empty. They're all like low-income housing. You can't build housing over an airport. What about the lake? Bringing people to the lakefront? Are you kidding me? Now
How long
you
would
have
how long would it take? How long would it take you to do that? Just the land, to build that land?
I've been working with Higley and some of the excavators and people around that do this stuff. There's two things that we would use to do it. We could probably do it in 2 seasons of dredging from the river. Just the dredging would go right there. Just put sheet pile in, which you could do ahead of time. And as they're dredging, they could put in, but the foundation can go in ahead of time, the caissons, and you could be filling around it. But there's plenty of, when I looked at the land, our idea, the biggest problem the Browns have, and they'll admit it to you, is parking.
Yes.
Where the hell are they going to park people? Where are they going to park?
That's the issue now with the current stadium. The big problem there is the parking for they knocked down those 2 little warehouses for the draft a couple years ago behind the stadium along the lake. So, I mean, that is still tight as a member of the media when I go to the games, how it is.
Well, I got the perfect answer. When you tear down the stadium, you still have the foundations there. You build what's called, now, if you know, when we built the whole thing about how Cleveland has done things in the past is we've not thought too much about going underground, but we did when we built the convention center. That whole convention center mall is under a big, huge parking lot.
True.
Well, it's
True.
underneath the mall. It's grass on top, right? Well, we can take the existing stadium. We don't have to take the foundations out. We just grade it out. We use that dirt, store it off to the side, and use that to do the finish. So it's a combination of existing dirt there. So I'm going to create a 3,500 car parking lot where the old stadium is, then build like your development on top of that, whether it's housing of any type. So the idea is you're freeing up a giant piece of land to build a nice, good underground parking lot on the land that they would control. So the idea is to use this whole development to kind of finance itself and make all this happen.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Amico from Cavs on the Break NBA podcast. Be sure to give us a listen for all your Cleveland Cavaliers recaps, analysis, breakdowns, draft talk, free agency. The list goes on and on. Give us a listen, Cavs on the Break NBA podcast.
What's up, everyone? I'm Holly Wetzel.
And I'm Tybus Powell.
And we are your hosts of The Orange is Oranger, a Cleveland Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network. We give you all the dog pound coverage that you'll need to get you through the regular season, hopeful postseason, and I'd say off-season, Tybus, but is there really ever an off-season for this team?
Thankfully for our podcast, Holly, there really never is when it comes to the Cleveland Browns. Don't miss our breakdown of each week's matchup, game recaps, and any and all news out of Berea to feed your Browns appetite. As we know, Holly, dogs gotta eat.
Yes, they do. So hit that subscribe button and never miss an episode of the Orange is Oranger, Cleveland Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network.
For the last few months, we partnered up with an Ohio-based company down in Columbus. It's called Homage. You probably have heard of this company or wearing some of their clothing.
I know they sent us some shirts recently, Scott. I got a Cavaliers old school shirt in the old 70s script.
Right now, I got a Cleveland Indian shirt or a Cleveland baseball shirt with the old script C, from back like old school, like 40s, 50s, early 60s. And man, does that thing fits great. Sometimes t-shirts don't fit right. This one fits great.
Yeah, you're pretty particular about how your shirts fit.
Yeah, I don't want it too baggy. Don't want it too tight. I want it just right so I can do a lot of things around the house and work out with it and what have you. And it's great material as well.
Yeah, it's soft on your delicate skin. That's for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, they also have great Ohio State gear, Browns gear, any MAC schools that you or your kids or you're an alum of. Great partnership there. All you need to do is go to our show notes wherever you're listening to the podcast and click on the link that we've provided there. And that is your open door to all great Homage gear. And you'll like it. We love it and continue to. So we appreciate their partnership.
What's up, everyone? Chase Smith here, host of the Chase Smith Podcast. And my podcast reflects who I am. My hobbies, my interests, my passions, my curiosities, my careers, my questions, and my family. I'll spend time talking about all types of sports, movies, TV shows, trending news stories, and other cultural events, and even faith. This is who I am, and I hope I can get to know you as well. Join me on the Chase Smith Podcast, and let's have some thought-provoking conversations, only on the Press Play Podcast Network.
Real quick, Robert, let's compare the owners here. You had Art Modell 40 years ago, their 80s, 90s, who wanted control. You have the Haslams now. Compare the two owners. Are the Haslams, to use the word stubborn, are controlling? Are they just as controlling, in your opinion, as Modell was back then? Is this a bigger roadblock than what it was back in the 80s?
Well, let me tell you, there was another step in here was Lerner. When Lerner bought.
Oh, Lerner, sure.
And I did a proposal, one of them I sent to you, of covering the existing stadium. And I figured out how to do it by the corners were open, so you could put pylons in the corner. And I presented it to him, and it caught a little bit of fire, but then he passed away. But at least I had somebody with a business mind that figured how the economics would work. If I would tell you the difference, I think that truly, I really believe that Haslams have in mind Cleveland and its future, because I think their future is based in Cleveland. They plan on staying here. Modell didn't. So as they plan on staying here, I think they're a little too dependent on their consultants. I'm going to tell you why that's a problem. Because if you got guys out of town, they got a big firm of 500 and they're doing stadiums all over the world. This is an intricate decision that isn't made by 500 people or 2 people. It's a development that has to be designed. What is the best idea? And put aside all other predetermined ideas. Put aside everything you've ever thought of in the past, because I firmly believe what I'm talking about solves 95% of their problems. They can stay in the stadium and play. They can build a brand new one without having to worry about remodeling the old one. And when they're done, they end up with a piece of land that's probably the most valuable piece of land on the waterfront that you could ever imagine. Instead of sitting there, if you look at the plans that have been developed, and they're trying to rebuild the stadium and do things to it and kind of stiff stuff things around. I'm saying, get rid of it, build the stadium out away from that site, clean that site up for development. I'm sure you guys have been to San Francisco and seen their stadium.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the Bay. Everybody said, hey, you can't fill the Bay in. They built it on fill out on the Bay. Where do they hit home runs? Over the fence. What a great place to watch baseball.
Do you have any plans on meeting with the Haslams? Like, what from going forward, what's the next stage for you?
Oh, I would love to meet with him. I don't care if it's for 15 minutes. I just put together a model, and I put together a 3D video that at least if they take one idea from what I have, they can at least enhance what they're thinking. But just because I think I've pretty much been shut out by everybody I talk to saying, oh, we're too far down the road. Wait a minute, we're too far down the road. It's still paper. I got an eraser. I'm an architect. You can erase it. What the hell's paper? We're too far down the road.
You could argue we were too far down the road in the 80s. You already had a corporation, the Dome Stadium Corporation, already up and running, and then they
Yeah. So the whole idea is you guys have seen what I sent you.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to see the model because I have it in detail. But the Hexatron itself is so unique. When they look at it, they're going to look at it has a lot of the concepts that got Model totally enhanced with it. And the big thing about it was if you see the design and you see how the seats are more in favor of 50-yard line seats and they're more favorable seating, but it's got a cover that has no columns and that was retractable and had multi-use. So everything about it made sense. He would not work. Jacobs were pretty sharp businessmen. They're not going to go into a deal and be secondhand either. So you just couldn't get the two together. But I think Haslam's control this. But you know what? Isn't this really our decision too? Isn't it our decision? Isn't it the peoples of Cuyahoga County and Cleveland deciding? Because I'm taking one position. We deserve a retractable stadium, the best we can build. We absolutely deserve it. Cleveland Browns deserve the best we can build. We shouldn't hold back to say, hey, it's too much money. When you got, I'll tell you, Jerry Jones, when he built his stadium, I think he put $1.5 billion to $2 billion. Everybody thought that was a lot of money back then. You know what's worth today? It's worth $8 billion. He's got the largest value of any franchise in football. Why? Because he owns a stadium, and the stadium increased his value tremendously. And you know how many times a year he uses that? I mean, look at all the events he has. He
Hundreds.
has the college football playoffs. He's got everything. Why couldn't we? We're located here, central to more people than anybody else.
And you're right. We have to make this appealing to the public because, Gateway barely passed. I remember looking at the votes back then, and the public here in Cleveland, for some reason, and I know the economics were different back then, but, a lot of times they, for whatever reason, it seems like the general public is always apprehensive about stuff like this. But if it's presented like you're presenting it, maybe it'll be more of a selling point for people and they'll vote for it.
Yeah, Scott and Robert, it seems like people of Cleveland for decades, like the last 50, 60, 70 years, are resistant to change and being the new of everything. And I don't know why that is.
Well, that's probably why, you know what, I think this is, for me, as far as a developer, there's a lot of things happening right now. I think Cleveland is going to explode when this really does happen because you've got Gilbert doing his riverfront thing.
Mm-hmm.
Got the lakefront thing happening. The county, I'm involved with trying to get a proposal for the county site. So you get a new development. There are things happening here. And I really believe the biggest momentum change is going to be that this is going to probably force Burke Lakefront to become a lakefront development because developers will come from all over the world to want to develop Burke Lakefront once this thing here works. So our future is our lake, and our future is we can do things now that I'm not going to wait. I'm older now than I was when I did Hexatron, but I don't think we have to wait 50 years for Cleveland to change. I think it's on the verge. I like the leadership of the mayor. I really do. I like he's got very forward thinking, and I think he's the guy that's probably going to look at I got to get to see him with this idea, but I think he's going to get it right away.
Have you tried to reach out to the Haslams yet?
Through secondary sources, yes, I have, and pretty much been replied to that, hey, we're too far along the way. We have an architect. I'm not trying to be their architect. I'm trying to help their architect. I'm trying to show them we can do something different because it isn't going to be 250 guys in that firm. It's going to have to be one guy that comes out with a great design. That's how design is done. I have something here that nobody has. And when you look at the model and you look at what it's It's futuristic. It's a greenhouse inside year round, something nobody has thought about doing. I have so many things to it that makes it a year-round facility to do so many things with that it's going to bring people to Cleveland and the lakefront. There's another part of my plan is, you know, I look at the future. I'm a guy who's always been ahead of things. Cleveland is going to be a hub for rail. It's going to be a hub for rail from Chicago to New York and from Cleveland to Columbus to Cincinnati. It's underway. It's happening. It's being funded. Okay, they want to build I'm fighting the same issue. They want to build a transportation center by the airport. You know where it belongs? Right downtown. That's where Swearingen moved it out of when they built the terminal tower. But part of this complex is building a transportation center where people come right to this facility. They walk right to the stadium. They go right to the events that are here. So we also have, and that's something that can be done outside of the public. That's something that private developers can do because it'll be a lease by the federal government. So it's a whole separate thing that can happen. To me, even add one more piece to this thing, because if you have a transportation center here with all this stuff happening, I mean, people come from everywhere to come to this facility.
Robert, I think looking at your designs, and thank you so much for sending that to Scott and me here. I'm looking at it, and I can't help but look at your Hexatron designs and see something similar to what's already in the NFL that could potentially bode well for you if you ever get a chance to meet with the Haslam's. And that's how similar in design it is to a structure to the Minnesota Vikings stadium up in Minneapolis, US Bank Stadium, which was designed by HKS, I believe. And that is rumored to be one of the developers, I think, that the Haslam's are looking or talking to, maybe.
Right.
I don't know, that's been reported it before, but I don't know if that helps or hurts. To me, it seems like that could help.
Let me tell you the truth about it. It's a takeoff of the Hexatron design.
Yeah, it looks like it.
And my firm, American Power Door Company, who's now Unisystems, is based in that city.
Oh, there you go.
So, they had a lot of input into it. They didn't get the job. Somebody else did. But anyway, I would look at Europe right now. Europe is so far ahead of us. They have taken 9 existing stadiums and put retractable roofs on it. 9. They were doing one, and they just did one in Barcelona. They took the existing stadium, remodeled it, and spent $1 billion putting a cover on it in Barcelona, and it's incredible.
And that's the stadium that has that facility underground that has the ultraviolet light that puts the field down.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're going to do here. Actually, there's 2 systems I've been talking about. One system is out of Singapore. Singapore just built the incredible stadium, and they're building it for football and soccer. So the whole idea, because soccer is a wider field. The way I designed the Hexatron is the seats around I don't know if you've seen, if you've been to Las Vegas Stadium, but you know how they have seating around this couch seating around the field because they're indoors. So you see, well, what you do is you design that couch seating so it retracts. And that's how you do soccer, lacrosse, rugby, and everything else without having to do something that's expensive. You slide it underneath their stands. So you can have multiple uses. We're not going to really design it for baseball, but we think that world soccer, rugby, lacrosse is going to be growing. We may have we're going to get a soccer team. That's almost for sure. They say they need a smaller stadium. Well, if soccer grows in popularity like it's expected, like it's done in other cities, they can play inside our stadium. They can play soccer because it won't be that big. They're going to be 78,000 seats. I don't think we should be anything less. The reason for that is we're going to start selling out if we start winning again. But if you have the retractable roof, let me tell you how I probably had the most inspiration when I was at the Oakland game when it was minus 15 degrees. I was a young guy. minus 15. It was so miserably cold. But I remember when they threw the interception, how the stadium was absolutely silent. Nobody moved. Then the weather started getting to you. That's when I said, we have to have something besides this for Cleveland. So that was kind of the start of it. And then I know last year I was at that the Saints game. Oh my God, was that bad? It was minus 50. I mean, we don't deserve that. And it's not just about one or two games. It's that you can use it year round. Why build it for 8 to 10 days a year? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
Not
and
to do
the home field advantage argument of, oh, the cold weather helps us. That's a bunch of BS because those two games you just referenced, the Browns lost.
Yeah. Well, there's something about the Hexatron design. When you look at the roof, it's 8-sided.
Mm-hmm.
Sound wins football games. Just ask Seattle. This stadium is a sound stadium because all the noise centralizes back down again. It's not dissipated. It's indoor, but the form of the roof, it's almost like and it's hard to describe it. It's like it amplifies your sound. So
it's got you're thinking of CenturyLink Field there in Seattle. It's got the top canopies that the sound drops down, and they're the closest stadium in the NFL in proximity to the fans, which elevates that sound even higher and bounces back on the field. It's incredible. And Arrowhead, similar in a way that you just mentioned earlier, how old it is, but how it's still modernized in that aspect of the sound quality of that. So,
yeah.
Robert, it is a fascinating topic. Your designs, and when we post this podcast, we'll put them on our social channels here. These pictures are beautiful, and hopefully you can get in contact with the Haslam's at some point and really, present your ideas and help them out and get something nice here in Cleveland, because we all know the Browns and our fan base here in the city of Cleveland deserve it.
Well, I keep, I don't want to go around the Browns. That's not what I'm trying to do. I've tried to meet with them. But I've met with the other people. I've met with politicians. I met with Chris Ronayne. I met with, you should go check Chris Ronayne's Twitter after I met with him. He had 16,000 people he sent it to. He's a planner. He gets it.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of things that are part of our favor is, the county's a big player in this. So, I've trying to work myself through the political side. I really need to meet with the mayor soon. And I got to get everybody understanding what this is. And what it is, it's an idea that fits all the needs, what everybody's looking for.
Mm-hmm.
No one in Cleveland, not one politician wants to move the stadium to Brook Park. Not one. There isn't one. And how are you going to fight that idea? By trying to move them when nobody wants to move. I think the idea is, how do you deal with the land you have? Well, it's simple. Just take the stadium, build it out a little bit farther, and be able to play there till you're done, and then create land now for your development. It's a simple solution that makes more sense.
Yeah, it does. On the surface, it does, in my opinion. I know my brother probably agrees. I think for them, I hope I'm wrong, but I hope the Haslam's aren't going to be like the Modells and get a little more greedy about things and want more money and want to go somewhere else in terms of Brook Park. Not out of the city, but keeping it in the city downtown, I think, is the best option for fans and everything. Robert, thank you so much for the time. Scott and I really enjoyed our conversation here. And if you get in touch with the Haslam's, let us know. We'd love to talk with you again and see how that goes, because this is a fascinating topic that for sure is not going away anytime soon.
No, I can guarantee you guys both that nobody's going to shut the door on me. I'm not going away, because I didn't with the Hexatron. And you know how I won the Hexatron? Public got behind it. The media got behind it. I didn't have politicians making the decision. I got this idea. I get everybody behind this one. Who wouldn't? As long as I can figure a way to finance it without them putting money in it, then I'd become king. But I think the idea, I could win over everyone who wants to keep the stadium downtown. And I'll tell you the other thing, if they're not paying for it, who wouldn't want to put a cover on it? We deserve it. And who wouldn't want a Super Bowl in Cleveland? I don't know who wouldn't. What businessman wouldn't recognize what a Super Bowl or two would mean to us?
Absolutely. Robert, that is, you hit the nail on the head. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And I tell you what, we'll definitely send you links so you can listen to this when we put this out, our interview with you coming up hopefully in the not too distant future. Thank you so much for joining us, Robert.
All right, thank you. Thanks very much. And
You got it, Robert. We'll talk to you.
for something to happen.
You got it, Robert. We'll talk to you later.
Yeah, Robert Corna with the Hexatron Stadium design. And boy, Scott, hopefully that can work out for everyone involved. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Remember, follow us on Twitter at Sabol Brothers. Follow yours truly at John Sabol.
And you can follow me at Scott Sabol Fox 8 on Twitter and on Instagram. Thank you so much, everybody. John, it was a fascinating interview, and hopefully we get this thing off the ground.
Yeah, Cleveland needs it, Scott. We'll see what happens. This story is not done yet. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.